The morning sun rose over New Helena like any other day. Daniel Cooper walked along the dusty main street of the colony, carrying his toolbox toward the water processing plant. He was 32 years old with calloused hands and a simple life. The colony had been his home for 10 years now, and he liked it that way. No crowded cities, no noise, just honest work and open skies. His sister Amy was already awake when he passed the school building. She waved at him through the window where she was setting up her classroom. Amy was 7 years younger than Daniel, and she had the same dark hair and gray eyes their mother had. Their parents died during the voyage from Earth, leaving Daniel to raise his little sister. He didn't mind. Amy was the only family he had left, and he would do anything to keep her safe. The colony was peaceful that morning. Children played in the streets while their parents worked in the fields or tended to machinery. New Helena wasn't rich or fancy, but it was home to 8,000 people who had built something good together. They grew food, maintained their equipment, and lived quiet lives far from Earth's problems. Nobody saw the ships coming until it was too late. The Zrathi fleet appeared in orbit without warning. Their vessels were massive, dark shapes that blocked out the sun as they descended. The colony's communication system went dead instantly. Every radio, every computer, every device that could send a signal stopped working. The Zrathi had jammed everything. Daniel was inside the water plant when the first explosions hit. The building shook and alarms started screaming. He dropped his tools and ran outside. What he saw made his blood turn cold. Alien ships were landing throughout the colony and soldiers were pouring out. They were huge creatures, at least 8 feet tall, covered in scales like reptiles. They wore armor and carried weapons that glowed with strange energy. People were screaming and running in every direction. The Zrathi soldiers moved through the streets, grabbing people and dragging them toward their transport ships. They didn't care if their captives were men, women, or children. They just took whoever they could catch. Daniel's first thought was Amy. He ran toward the school building, pushing through the panicked crowds. His heart pounded in his chest.
He had to get to her.
He had to make sure she was safe. The school was in chaos when he arrived. Teachers were trying to protect the children, but it was useless. A Zrathi soldier crashed through the front door, its massive frame filling the doorway. Daniel saw Amy near the back of the room, her face pale with terror. He grabbed a piece of broken pipe from the ground and charged at the alien. The Zrathi turned to face him, and for a moment they locked eyes. The creature's eyes were yellow and cold like a snake's. It raised its weapon, but Daniel swung the pipe with all his strength. The metal connected with the alien's head, and the creature stumbled backward. But more soldiers were coming. Daniel fought his way toward Amy, swinging the pipe at anything that moved. He managed to reach her and pulled her close. Other people were running toward the emergency shelter at the edge of town. Daniel grabbed Amy's hand and ran with them. They almost made it. A Zrathi transport ship landed directly in their path, blocking the way to safety. The rear door opened and soldiers jumped out. People scattered in every direction, but there were too many aliens. Daniel held Amy tight, trying to shield her with his body. A Zrathi warrior grabbed Amy from behind, ripping her out of Daniel's arms. She screamed his name, reaching for him. Daniel lunged forward, but another soldier hit him hard across the face. He fell to the ground, tasting blood. He could see Amy being dragged toward the transport ship. She was fighting and screaming, but the alien was too strong. Daniel tried to get up, tried to run after her, but his legs wouldn't work right. His vision was blurry from the hit he took. A piece of construction equipment sat abandoned nearby. Daniel crawled toward it, his hands shaking. It was a plasma cutter, used for welding metal. He grabbed it and turned it on. The tool hummed to life, its cutting edge glowing white-hot. With the last of his strength, Daniel charged at the Zrathi, holding his sister. He swung the plasma cutter in a wide arc. The superheated edge cut through the alien's armor and into its side. The creature roared in pain and dropped Amy, but Daniel's victory lasted only a second. 2 more Zrathi soldiers grabbed him from behind. One of them hit him with the butt of its weapon. Pain exploded through Daniel's skull and the world started to go dark. As he fell, he saw Amy being picked up again. He saw her terrified face looking back at him as the soldiers carried her onto the transport ship. He tried to call her name, but no sound came out. Everything went black. When Daniel woke up, the sun was setting. His head throbbed with pain and dried blood covered his face. He was lying in the street where he had fallen. Around him, the colony was in ruins. Buildings were damaged, fires were burning, and bodies lay scattered in the dust. He sat up slowly, looking around in a daze. The Zrathi ships were gone. They had taken what they wanted and left. Other survivors were starting to emerge from hiding places, their faces shocked and empty. Daniel stumbled to his feet and started searching. He called Amy's name over and over, checking every building, every shelter, every hiding place. But she wasn't there. The Zrathi had taken her, along with dozens of other people. Someone told him that 63 colonists were missing. 63 people dragged onto alien ships and carried away to unknown fates. The number meant nothing to Daniel. He only cared about one person. That night, Daniel sat in the ruins of what used to be his home. His hands were still shaking and his mind kept replaying the moment Amy was taken. He had failed to protect her. The one person in the universe who mattered to him was gone, and he didn't know where. Other survivors talked about rebuilding, about sending messages to Earth, about moving on. Daniel heard their voices, but the words didn't register. His mind was working on something else, something cold and focused. The Zrathi had made a mistake. They thought they could just take people from their homes and disappear into space. They thought humans were weak and helpless. They thought there would be no consequences. They were wrong. Daniel made a decision that night, sitting in the darkness of his ruined home. He didn't care how long it took. He didn't care how far he had to go. He didn't care what it cost him. He was going to find Amy, and he was going to make the Zrathi pay for every moment of suffering they had caused. The aliens thought they knew violence. They thought they understood war, but they had never met a human with nothing left to lose. They had never faced someone who would burn down the entire galaxy to save one person. The Zrathi would learn. Daniel would teach them, and the lesson would be written in blood. 3 days passed like a nightmare. Daniel barely slept or ate. He spent every moment searching through the colony's damaged computers, trying to find any information about the attack. Other survivors worked on cleaning up and treating the wounded, but Daniel had only one focus. He needed to know where the Zrathi had taken Amy. On the third day, a military ship appeared in orbit. The vessel was called the UES Vengeance, and it was one of Earth's destroyer-class warships. When it landed, soldiers and medical personnel poured out. They brought supplies, medicine, and promises of help. The ship's captain was a woman named Helen Morrison. She was in her 50s with short gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too much combat. She walked through the colony, talking to survivors and making notes on a tablet. When she reached Daniel, he was sitting outside the ruins of the school building, staring at nothing. Captain Morrison sat down next to him. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at the damaged buildings and the smoke still rising from some of the fires. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry this happened to your colony. We're doing everything we can to help." Daniel turned to look at her. His eyes were red from lack of sleep and his voice was rough. "Where did they take them? Where did the Zrathi go?" Morrison sighed. She had been expecting this question. The Zrathi Empire is huge. It covers hundreds of star systems. They have slave markets on dozens of worlds. The people they took could be anywhere. So find them, Daniel said. You have ships. You have weapons. Go get them back. The captain shook her head slowly. It's not that simple. The Zrathi are powerful. If we send ships into their territory, we could start a war. Earth's government won't authorize a rescue mission for 63 people when billions could die in the fighting. Daniel stood up, his hands clenched into fists. So you're just going to leave them there? Leave my sister to be a slave for those creatures? Morrison stood as well, facing him. I understand your anger. I've lost people too. But I have orders, and those orders don't include invading Zrathi space. Daniel stared at her for a long moment, then walked away without another word. Morrison watched him go, knowing that look in his eyes. She had seen it before in soldiers who had lost everything. It was the look of someone who had stopped caring about rules or consequences. That night, Daniel broke into the Vengeance's data systems. It wasn't hard. The military had sent their technical team to help repair the colony's computers, and Daniel knew more about technology than most soldiers. He copied every file he could find about the Zrathi, maps of their territory, reports on their military, intelligence about their slave trade routes. One person noticed what he was doing. Lieutenant Jake Harrison was a Marine stationed on the Vengeance. He was younger than Daniel, maybe 25, with a face that still looked boyish despite the scars. Harrison had been monitoring the data network when he saw someone accessing classified files. He found Daniel in one of the colony's computer rooms, staring at screens filled with alien star charts. Harrison should have arrested him on the spot. Instead, he sat down at another terminal. "You're looking in the wrong place," Harrison said quietly. "The main slave processing stations are here and here." He pointed at 2 systems on the star chart. Daniel looked at him, surprised. "Why are you helping me?" Harrison's face was hard. "My brother was taken by raiders 5 years ago. I never found him. The military said it was impossible, just like the captain told you. But if I had another chance, if I could go back, I would have gone after him anyway. Rules be damned." For the next 2 hours, Harrison showed Daniel everything he knew about Zrathi operations, the locations of their processing stations, the routes their transport ships used, the security measures they employed. It was enough information to get Daniel killed, but it was also enough to give him a chance. When they were done, Harrison stood to leave. "Good luck. I hope you find her." "Come with me," Daniel said suddenly. Harrison shook his head. "I can't. I have duties here. But there's someone who might help you. Marcus Webb. He was in the service with you, wasn't he? Last I heard, he was running cargo between colonies." Daniel remembered Marcus. They had served together on a transport ship years ago, before Daniel left the military to help build New Helena. Marcus was a good pilot and a better friend. If anyone would be crazy enough to help with this plan, it would be him. Daniel spent the next day making calls on the colony's repaired communication system. When he finally reached Marcus, his old friend was hauling supplies to a mining station 3 systems away. "Daniel? Man, I heard about what happened to New Helena. Are you okay?" "No," Daniel said simply. "I need your help, Marcus. The Zrathi took Amy. I'm going after her and I need a ship." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You want to fly into Zrathi space? Do you have any idea how insane that is?" "Yes, are you going to help me or not?" Another pause. Then Marcus sighed. "The Frontier Runner isn't a warship, you know. She's a cargo hauler, but I guess she'll have to do. I'll be there in 2 days. Start getting supplies ready." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. He wasn't alone in this. He had a ship and a pilot. Now he needed weapons and people willing to use them. Word of Daniel's plan spread through the colony. Most people thought he was suicidal, but some understood. 3 other people volunteered to join him. Lisa Grant's husband had been taken in the raid. Kevin Brooks lost his teenage son. Ryan Foster and 2 other former security officers wanted revenge for what the Zrathi had done to their home. Daniel used all his savings to buy weapons on the black market. It wasn't much compared to military gear, but it would have to do. Rifles, pistols, explosives, anything that could kill a Zrathi soldier. Captain Morrison discovered what Daniel was planning the day before the Frontier Runner arrived. She confronted him in the colony's main square. "You're going to get yourself killed," she said. "Probably," Daniel agreed. "And you might start a war that will cost millions of lives." "Maybe. But I'm going anyway." Morrison studied his face for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised them both. She pulled a data chip from her pocket and handed it to him. "This has updated intelligence on Zrathi fleet positions and patrol routes. If anyone asks, you stole it from our systems." Daniel took the chip, his hand shaking slightly. "Why are you doing this?" The captain's face was sad. "Because if I was in your position, I would do the same thing. The Zrathi think they can take our people without consequences. Maybe it's time someone taught them different." She turned to leave, then looked back. "The Zrathi have conquered 17 species. They think they understand violence. Show them what happens when they mess with humans who have nothing left to lose." When the Frontier Runner landed 2 days later, Daniel was ready. His small team loaded their weapons and supplies onto the ship. As they prepared to leave, Daniel took one last look at New Helena. The colony was starting to rebuild, but the scars of the attack would never fully heal. Amy was out there somewhere, scared and alone. Daniel was coming for her, and anyone who got in his way was going to regret it. The Frontier Runner crossed into Zrathi territory 5 days after leaving New Helena. Marcus Webb sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls despite the danger they were flying into. The ship was old but reliable, a boxy cargo hauler that had seen better days. It wasn't built for combat, but Marcus had added a few modifications over the years. Hidden compartments, upgraded engines, and a couple of old military sensors that he never mentioned to customs officials. Daniel stood behind Marcus, watching the navigation display. Red markers showed Zrathi patrol routes based on the intelligence Captain Morrison had provided. They were using smuggler paths through asteroid fields and sensor dead zones, trying to avoid detection. "This is crazy, you know," Marcus said without taking his eyes off the screen. "We're 7 people in a cargo ship going up against an empire that has crushed entire civilizations." "I know," Daniel replied. "We're probably all going to die." "I know that too." Marcus smiled slightly. "Just wanted to make sure we were on the same page." Behind them in the cargo hold, the rest of the team was preparing weapons and checking equipment. Lisa Grant sat cleaning a rifle with practiced movements. Her face showed no emotion, but everyone knew she was thinking about her husband. Kevin Brooks was teaching his security officers how to use the military-grade plasma cutters they had bought on the black market. The weapons were designed for cutting through ship hulls, but they would work just as well on Zrathi armor. Ryan Foster was studying maps of the slave processing station. According to Harrison's intelligence, this was where the Zrathi took new captives for sorting and evaluation. If Amy and the others were still alive, they would be there. The station came into view 3 hours later. It was massive, a sprawling structure in orbit around a barren moon. Dozens of ships were docked there, and Zrathi warships patrolled the area. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Getting in was going to be hard. Getting out might be impossible. Marcus activated the communication system. "All right, everyone into the hidden compartments. Time to see if my fake credentials work." The team moved quickly, climbing into specially built spaces beneath the cargo floor. The compartments were cramped and uncomfortable, but they were shielded from most sensors. Daniel was the last one in, lying in darkness with his rifle pressed against his chest. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears. The frontier runner approached the station slowly, broadcasting Marcus's forged identity as an independent trader. For several minutes, there was no response. Then a harsh voice came over the radio, speaking in heavily accented English. "Cargo ship, state your business." Marcus kept his voice casual, looking to buy some merchandise. "Heard you folks have quality stock." Another pause. Daniel held his breath in the darkness of the hidden compartment. Everything depended on the next few seconds. Proceed to docking bay 7. Prepare for inspection. The ship moved forward, and Daniel felt it settle onto the docking clamps. He heard footsteps on the hull above them. Zrathi inspectors were boarding the ship. Through the thin walls of his hiding spot, Daniel could hear voices. Marcus was talking to someone, probably showing his false credentials. Then he heard something that made his blood run cold, a Zrathi voice speaking in its own language. Then another voice responding in English. "These documents look suspicious. We're impounding the ship for further investigation." Marcus tried to argue, but it was no use. More footsteps echoed through the ship. They were bringing in more inspectors. The mission was falling apart before it even started. Daniel made a decision. He triggered the release on his compartment and burst out, rifle raised. The other compartments opened at the same time. 7 humans emerged into the cargo bay, weapons ready, facing a dozen surprised Zrathi soldiers. For a single moment, everyone froze. Then Daniel pulled the trigger. The cargo bay erupted in violence. Plasma bolts and bullets filled the air. The Zrathi soldiers were bigger and stronger, but they hadn't expected resistance. 3 of them went down in the first seconds of fighting. Daniel ran forward, firing as he moved. A Zrathi warrior swung a massive fist at his head. He ducked under it and jammed his rifle barrel into the creature's throat, pulling the trigger. The alien fell backward, gurgling. One of the security officers, Paul Martinez, wasn't as lucky. A Zrathi plasma weapon hit him in the chest. Paul went down without making a sound. His death only made the others fight harder. Lisa Grant moved like a machine, her rifle barking in controlled bursts. Every shot hit its target. Kevin Brooks used a plasma cutter to slice through a Zrathi soldier's armor like it was paper. The alien screamed and fell. Ryan Foster reached the door controls and hacked into the station's computer system. Alarms started blaring throughout the facility. Suddenly, every slave pen on the station opened at once. Thousands of captives from dozens of species saw their cell doors unlock. They saw their captors under attack, and they rushed out in a wave of desperate fury. The station descended into chaos. Zrathi guards found themselves fighting on multiple fronts. Slaves who had been beaten and broken for months or years suddenly had a chance at freedom. And they took it. Some grabbed weapons from fallen guards. Others used tools or their bare hands. The uprising spread through the station like wildfire. Daniel's team fought their way deeper into the facility. Every corridor was a battle. Every room held enemies. But they pushed forward, following the maps Ryan had memorized. The holding cells for new captives were on the lower levels. They lost another person when a squad of Zrathi soldiers ambushed them at a junction. Claire Stevens threw herself in front of Kevin, taking a plasma bolt meant for him. She died instantly, but her sacrifice let the others fight back and kill their attackers. Daniel felt tears on his face, but he didn't slow down. Paul and Claire were dead. He couldn't let their sacrifice be for nothing. Finally, they reached the processing area. Rows of holding cells lined the walls, filled with terrified people of various species. Daniel scanned the faces desperately, searching for one in particular. Then he saw her. Amy was in the third cell, pressed against the back wall with a dozen other humans from New Helena. Her face was bruised and her clothes were torn, but she was alive. "Amy!" Daniel shouted, running to the cell. His hand shook as he worked the lock. When the door opened, Amy stumbled out and fell into his arms. She was crying, holding on to him like she would never let go. "I knew you'd come," she sobbed. "I told them my brother would find me." Daniel held her tight, feeling emotions he couldn't name. Relief, joy, rage, grief. All of it mixed together in a way that made it hard to breathe. But there was no time for reunion. They had to move, everyone out, Kevin shouted, opening all the other cells. The New Helena colonists emerged, weak and scared but alive, all 63 of them. Lisa Grant was checking the other cells when she found what she had been looking for. Her husband, Greg, was there, but he wasn't moving. A Zrathi guard stood over his body. Lisa didn't hesitate. She shot the guard, then knelt beside her husband's body. Greg had been dead for days. Something broke inside Lisa at that moment. She stood up slowly, her face empty of expression. Without a word, she grabbed a bag of explosives from Ryan's pack and walked away from the group. "Lisa, wait," Daniel called, but she ignored him. The rest of the team led the freed captives back toward the docking bay. The station was falling apart around them. Fires burned everywhere, and the life support systems were failing. Slaves were still fighting guards throughout the facility. They were halfway to the ship when the explosion hit. Lisa had made it to the station's reactor core and detonated all the explosives at once. The blast tore through the power systems, causing chain reactions throughout the station. Marcus had the Frontier runner ready when they arrived. Everyone piled aboard in a chaotic rush. Daniel did a quick count: 63 freed colonists plus Marcus, Kevin, Ryan, and himself. Only 4 of the original 7 who had started this mission. The Frontier runner undocked as the station began to break apart behind them. Explosions rippled across its surface. Ships were trying to evacuate, but many wouldn't make it. Daniel sat in the cargo hold, holding Amy as she cried against his shoulder. They had done it. They had rescued the captives. But the price had been terrible. 3 good people were dead, and they had just committed an act of war against the Zrathi Empire. The consequences were going to be catastrophic. News of the attack on the Zrathi slave station spread across the galaxy like fire. The Zrathi High Command received the reports with a mixture of shock and fury. A prey species had dared to strike them. Humans, a race they considered primitive and weak, had destroyed one of their facilities and freed thousands of slaves. It was unthinkable. It was intolerable. It demanded a response that would echo across the stars. The Council of War met in the Great Chamber on the Zrathi homeworld. 12 military leaders sat in a circle, their scaled faces illuminated by holographic displays showing the destroyed station. Admiral Kralthar stood at the center, his yellow eyes burning with rage. "The humans must be crushed," he said, his voice like gravel. "We will make an example of them that every species in the galaxy will remember." "No one strikes the Zrathi Empire without paying in blood," the council agreed unanimously. Within days, a battle fleet began assembling. 15 warships, including 2 massive dreadnoughts, prepared for departure. Their target was the human colony worlds. The Zrathi would burn them to ash. Meanwhile, the Frontier runner raced back toward human space. The rescued colonists were crowded in the cargo hold, traumatized but alive. Amy stayed close to Daniel, jumping at every sound. The others were the same, carrying scars that would never fully heal. When they finally crossed into Earth-controlled space, military ships were waiting. The Frontier runner was immediately surrounded by destroyers and ordered to dock with a military station. Daniel knew what was coming. He had started a war, and Earth's government was going to have questions. Military police arrested Daniel and the others the moment they stepped off the ship. The rescued colonists were taken to medical facilities. Amy screamed and tried to hold on to her brother as they separated them, but the guards pulled her away. Daniel watched her go, his heart breaking again. They put Daniel in a cell on the military station. For 3 days he sat alone, waiting. He thought about Paul, Claire, and Lisa. He thought about the Zrathi soldiers he had killed. He thought about Amy's face when she realized he had come for her. He didn't regret what he had done. Even knowing the consequences, he would do it all again. On the 4th day, they took him to an interrogation room. A man in an admiral's uniform sat waiting. He was in his 60s with gray hair cut military short and eyes that had seen decades of service. His name tag read Hayes. Admiral Christopher Hayes studied Daniel in silence for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice measured and calm. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I rescued my sister and 62 other people from slavery," Daniel said. Hayes nodded slowly. "Yes, you did. You also destroyed a Zrathi military installation, killed approximately 200 Zrathi soldiers, and started what might become a full-scale war. The Zrathi have assembled a battle fleet. Intelligence suggests they're heading for our colony worlds." Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach, but he kept his voice steady. "What would you have done if it was your family?" The Admiral leaned back in his chair. "The same thing you did, probably. That's the problem. I understand why you acted. Hell, part of me admires it. But understanding doesn't change the situation. The Zrathi are coming, and Earth is not ready for this fight." "Then get ready," Daniel said, "because they're not going to stop with one attack. I saw how they operate. They take what they want and crush anyone who resists. If we don't stand up to them now, they'll keep coming back." Hayes was quiet for a moment, then tapped a control on the table. A holographic display appeared showing star charts and fleet positions. The Zrathi force was massive, far larger than anything Earth could match. "We have maybe 20 combat-capable ships in the entire fleet," Hayes said. "They have 15 in just this one battle group. Our technology is inferior. Our weapons are less powerful. In a straight fight, we lose, badly." "Then don't fight straight," Daniel replied. "The Zrathi think they're superior. They believe their size and strength make them unbeatable. Use that against them. Hit them where they're weak. Make them bleed for every inch they take. Show them that humans don't quit no matter the odds." The Admiral studied Daniel's face. "You really believe we can win this?" "I don't know if we can win," Daniel said honestly. "But I know we can make them regret starting it. I saw the fear in their eyes when we attacked that station. They weren't expecting resistance. They've spent centuries conquering species that rolled over and died. They don't know what to do with enemies who fight back." Hayes stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. "I've spent 20 years warning the government about threats like the Zrathi. Nobody wanted to listen. We were too busy with internal politics and budget concerns. Now we're facing exactly what I predicted and we're not prepared." He turned back to Daniel. "I should court-martial you and lock you away for the rest of your life. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to make you an offer." Daniel waited. "I need someone who understands how the Zrathi think, someone who has fought them and won, someone who isn't afraid to do whatever it takes. Work with me as a tactical consultant. Help me figure out how to fight this war. In return, I'll make sure Amy and the other colonists are protected." "I'm not a soldier anymore," Daniel said. "No, but you're something more useful. You're someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. That makes you dangerous. And right now, I need dangerous." Daniel thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "I have one condition. When the Zrathi come, I want to be there. I want to look them in the eye and show them what happens when they take our people." Hayes smiled grimly. "Deal." The Zrathi fleet arrived at New Pittsburgh 12 days later. The colony had been given evacuation orders, but 12,000 people couldn't be moved quickly. Most were still on the surface when the alien ships appeared in orbit. Admiral Kralthar broadcast his ultimatum on all frequencies. His voice was full of contempt and confidence. "Humans of New Pittsburgh, you will surrender immediately. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your colony. You have 1 hour to decide." The colonial administrator was a retired military officer named Karen White. She was 70 years old and had fought in 3 different conflicts. When she responded to the Zrathi ultimatum, her message was short. Come try. Kralthar was surprised by the response, but not concerned. He ordered his fleet to advance in standard battle formation. This would be a quick demonstration of Zrathi power. After they reduced New Pittsburgh to ruins, other human colonies would surrender without a fight. What Kralthar didn't know was that Admiral Hayes had been moving assets into position for days. 3 human destroyers and a carrier group were hidden in the system's dense asteroid field. Hayes had also equipped the colony with surface-to-orbit missiles, turning New Pittsburgh into a fortress. Daniel stood on the bridge of Hayes's flagship, the UES Defiance. He wore a military consultant badge and had access to all tactical displays. His hands gripped the railing as he watched the Zrathi fleet approach. They're coming in tight formation, he said. They think their shields and armor make them invincible. They're not expecting us to fight back. Hayes nodded. All ships, this is actual. Prepare to engage on my mark. Show these aliens what happens when they mess with humanity. The human ships emerged from the asteroid field like vengeful ghosts. At the same moment, the colony's surface batteries opened fire. Hundreds of missiles streaked upward toward the Zrathi fleet. Admiral Kralthar had exactly 5 seconds to realize his mistake before the first missiles hit his formation. The Battle of New Pittsburgh had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn a lesson written in fire and blood. The Zrathi had conquered 17 species over 1,000 years. But they had never fought humans before. They were about to discover the difference. The Zrathi fleet scattered as missiles tore through their formation. Admiral Kralthar watched in disbelief as 3 of his cruisers took direct hits before they could even respond. Human weapons were supposed to be primitive. This attack was coordinated and precise. Return fire, he roared. Destroy those ships. But the human destroyers weren't where the Zrathi expected them to be. They moved in unpredictable patterns, firing and then disappearing back into the asteroid field. The Zrathi weapons were more powerful, but they couldn't hit targets that refused to stand still. On the UES Defiance, Daniel watched the tactical display with fierce satisfaction. They're confused. They don't know how to fight an enemy that won't face them head-on. Admiral Hayes gave orders calmly, directing his ships like pieces on a chessboard. Morrison, take the Vengeance on an attack run against their left flank. Hit them hard and break off before they can lock weapons. Captain Helen Morrison's voice came through the radio, steady despite the chaos. Copy that, Admiral. Vengeance moving to attack. The destroyer accelerated toward the Zrathi formation, its weapons firing continuously. Missiles and plasma bolts hammered against a Zrathi cruiser's shields. The alien ship turned to face this new threat, but Morrison was already pulling away. However, 2 Zrathi dreadnoughts were moving to intercept. They were massive ships, each one carrying enough firepower to level a planet. Morrison saw them coming but didn't change course. She had a different plan. All power to forward shields, she ordered her crew. I'm going to give them something to remember. The Vengeance dove straight toward one of the dreadnoughts, firing everything it had. The Zrathi ship's shields absorbed most of the damage, but Morrison wasn't trying to destroy it. She was trying to get close. At the last possible moment, Morrison initiated an emergency reactor overload. The Vengeance's power core went critical just as the ship collided with the dreadnought's hull. The explosion was massive, tearing a hole through the alien vessel's armor and destroying most of its weapon systems. Morrison and her entire crew died in that moment, but they took half a Zrathi dreadnought with them. Daniel felt something cold and hard settle in his chest as he watched Morrison's ship disappear from the tactical display. He hadn't known her well, but she had helped him when others wouldn't. Now she was gone, along with 300 crew members. She gave us an opening, Hayes said quietly. We need to use it. The battle raged for hours. Human ships darted in and out of the asteroid, striking and retreating. The colony's surface batteries continued launching missiles until their ammunition ran out. Zrathi ships burned and died, but so did human vessels. The destroyer Atlantic was caught by 3 Zrathi cruisers and torn apart by concentrated fire. The carrier Lexington managed to launch all its fighters before a Zrathi torpedo hit its hangar bay, starting fires that eventually consumed the entire ship. Human pilots and small fighters attacked Zrathi warships like insects attacking giants, sacrificing themselves to destroy engines and weapon systems. Admiral Kralthar felt something he had never experienced in his long military career: fear. The humans were supposed to be easy prey. They were supposed to collapse under Zrathi might. Instead, they fought like creatures possessed. They rammed their ships into his vessels. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation. They refused to retreat even when surrounded. One human fighter pilot, running out of ammunition, deliberately crashed his craft into the bridge of a Zrathi cruiser. The impact killed the entire command crew and left the ship drifting helplessly. By the time Kralthar ordered a retreat, he had lost 6 warships completely, and 8 more were heavily damaged. One of his dreadnoughts was barely functional. The humans had lost all 3 destroyers and most of their fighters, but they had won. The colony below was still intact. As the Zrathi fleet limped away from New Pittsburgh, Kralthar stared at the tactical displays in shock. How had this happened? How had a handful of human ships defeated a force 3 times their size? The answer was simple, though it took him days to understand. The humans hadn't fought to win. They had fought to make the Zrathi bleed. Every human ship lost had taken multiple Zrathi vessels with it. Every human death had cost the enemy dearly. It was a kind of warfare the Zrathi had never encountered before. News of the Battle of New Pittsburgh spread across the galaxy faster than light. Other species, many of whom had been conquered and enslaved by the Zrathi, heard the story with amazement. The humans had fought back. The humans had won. On a distant world, a species called the Veklar had been slaves to the Zrathi Empire for 300 years. They were a peaceful people who had surrendered when the Zrathi first arrived, hoping to avoid bloodshed. That decision had cost them their freedom, but now, hearing about the human resistance, something changed in the Veklar. A young leader named Tokmir gathered others in secret meetings. If humans could fight the Zrathi, why couldn't they? What if the Empire wasn't as strong as everyone believed? Similar conversations were happening on slave worlds throughout the Zrathi Empire. The humans had shown that resistance was possible. They had proven that the Zrathi could bleed. On Earth, Daniel sat in a hospital room next to Amy's bed. She had been through medical treatment and psychological counseling, but the nightmares still came every night. She held his hand as she slept, afraid to let go. Admiral Hayes entered quietly. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. The victory at New Pittsburgh had come at a terrible cost, and he knew more fighting was ahead. "The Zrathi High Command has called an emergency council," Hayes said softly. "Intelligence suggests they're mobilizing their entire military. They're going to come at us with everything they have." Daniel looked up from his sister's sleeping face. "How many ships?" "Estimates suggest 100 warships, maybe more. It's the largest fleet they've assembled in decades." Hayes paused. "We can't win that fight, Daniel. We just don't have the numbers." "Then we don't try to win," Daniel said. "We make it cost them everything. We turn human space into a graveyard for their ships. We make them pay for every light year they advance. Eventually, they'll realize that conquering us will destroy them." Hayes considered this. "A war of attrition. It means accepting massive losses on our side." "We're already facing massive losses," Daniel pointed out. "At least this way, we make sure they share the pain. And there's something else. Other species are watching what happens here. If we show them the Zrathi can be hurt, they might start their own rebellions. The Empire will have to fight on multiple fronts." The Admiral nodded slowly. "A long, brutal war that bleeds them from 1,000 cuts. It could work, but the cost in human lives will be staggering." Amy stirred in her sleep, whimpering. Daniel stroked her hair gently until she settled down. When he looked back at Hayes, his eyes were hard. "The Zrathi started this war when they took our people. They thought we were weak. They thought we would accept being victims. Now they're going to learn what it means to make humans angry. Every ship they send will destroy or damage. Every soldier they commit will kill or wound. Every world they take will make them fight for. By the time this is over, they'll wish they had never heard of humanity." Hayes studied the younger man for a long moment. Daniel Cooper had been a simple construction engineer 2 months ago. Now he was planning the strategy for a galactic war. The transformation was remarkable and terrifying. "I'll present your strategy to Earth Command," Hayes said finally. "And Daniel? Your sister is lucky to have you." After the Admiral left, Daniel sat in the quiet hospital room listening to Amy breathe. Outside the window, ships were arriving at Earth's orbital stations. Volunteers from every human colony were coming to join the fight. The word had spread about what the Zrathi had done, and humans everywhere were responding with fury. The Zrathi Empire was about to learn a lesson that would echo through history. You could conquer humans. You could kill them. But you could never make them give up. And the price for trying would be paid in blood. The Zrathi armada gathered at the edge of human space like a storm about to break. 100 warships, the largest military force the Empire had assembled in half a century. The sight was terrifying and magnificent. Ship after ship emerged from jump points, joining the formation that would sweep humanity from the galaxy. Admiral Kralthar stood on the bridge of his new flagship, staring at the tactical displays. He had been given supreme command of this operation with a single order: eradicate the human species. The High Command wanted no more surprises, no more defeats. They wanted the humans erased from existence. But Kralthar felt uneasy. Something about the Battle of New Pittsburgh bothered him. The humans had fought with a ferocity that defied logic. They had sacrificed themselves without hesitation. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen anything like it. His second-in-command, a younger officer named Sektar, noticed his expression. "Are you concerned about the humans, Admiral? They have perhaps 20 ships. We have 100. Victory is certain." Kralthar didn't respond immediately. Finally, he said, "Never underestimate an enemy who has nothing to lose. The humans have shown they will die before surrendering. That makes them dangerous." On Earth, Admiral Hayes stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing defensive positions throughout human space. 23 ships. That was all he had left. 23 vessels against 100. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Daniel stood beside him, studying the same displays. In the weeks since New Pittsburgh, he had become Hayes's closest advisor. Together, they had developed a strategy that went against every principle of traditional warfare. They weren't going to defend Earth. They weren't going to face the Zrathi fleet in open battle. Instead, they were going to make the Zrathi pay for every inch of space they advanced through. "All ships in position?" Hayes asked. An officer nodded. "Confirmed, sir. Strike groups are deployed throughout the outer systems. Supply caches are hidden in the asteroid fields. Colony populations have been evacuated to fortified positions." Hayes took a deep breath. "Then we're as ready as we'll ever be. Send the signal. Execute Operation Bleeding Star." The operation began with hit-and-run attacks across a dozen systems simultaneously. Small human task forces struck Zrathi logistics ships, destroyed supply depots, and mined jump points. They never stayed to fight. They hit hard and disappeared before the Zrathi could respond. Admiral Kralthar quickly realized what the humans were doing. They were bleeding his fleet through 1,000 small cuts. Every advance required his ships to sweep for mines. Every supply convoy needed heavy escort. His progress slowed to a crawl, but the Zrathi kept coming. Slowly, system by system, they pushed deeper into human space. The cost was high, but they were winning. Or so it seemed. What Kralthar didn't know was that something else was happening across the galaxy. On slave worlds throughout the Zrathi Empire, rebellions were starting. On the Veklar homeworld, Tokmir led an uprising that seized control of the planetary government. The Veklar weren't warriors, but they had learned from the humans. They didn't need to win fair fights. They just needed to make occupation too expensive to maintain. Other species joined the rebellion. The Karathi, the Yellen, the Peks. Worlds that had been conquered centuries ago suddenly erupted in violence. The Zrathi garrison forces found themselves under attack from populations they had thought were pacified. The Zrathi High Command faced a nightmare scenario. Their main fleet was committed to fighting humans, but their empire was falling apart from within. They had to divert ships to suppress the rebellions, which meant fewer ships pushing toward Earth. Marcus Webb died in the 3rd month of the war. His cargo ship, now armed and serving as a guerrilla raider, was caught by a Zrathi patrol. Rather than surrender, Marcus rammed his ship into a Zrathi supply freighter at full speed. Both vessels were destroyed instantly. Ryan Foster died defending a mining colony. He held a choke point against Zrathi soldiers for 3 hours, giving civilians time to evacuate. When his ammunition ran out, he detonated explosives that collapsed the tunnel, burying himself and 24 Zrathi warriors. Kevin Brooks survived longer. He became captain of a destroyer and led dozens of successful raids against Zrathi positions. But eventually his luck ran out. His ship was ambushed by superior forces. Brooks ordered his crew to abandon ship, then stayed behind to pilot the vessel on one final attack. His destroyer crashed into a Zrathi command center, killing the regional military governor and his entire staff. The war ground on for months. Human losses were catastrophic. Colonies were destroyed. Ships were lost. Thousands died every week. But the Zrathi were bleeding too. For every human ship lost, they lost 2 or 3. For every colony they destroyed, they spent weeks repairing damaged vessels and replacing casualties. Admiral Kralthar sat in his quarters, staring at casualty reports. His magnificent armada of 100 ships had been reduced to 47. The humans were down to maybe 8 or 9 functional vessels, but they showed no signs of giving up. And now his supply lines were collapsing as rebellion spread throughout the Empire. He finally understood what the humans had known from the beginning. This wasn't a war that could be won through strength. It was a war of will, and the humans had an endless supply of it. On Earth, Admiral Hayes received a message from Zarathi High Command. They wanted to negotiate. For the first time in their empire's history, the Zarathi were offering peace terms rather than demanding surrender. Daniel was in the meeting when the Zarathi delegation arrived. They were led by an older Zarathi diplomat named Korval, who looked tired and wary. The negotiations were tense. Korval tried to maintain Zarathi pride while making concessions. The Empire recognizes human sovereignty over your current territories. We will cease all hostile actions in exchange for the same commitment from humanity. Hayes looked at Daniel before responding. Daniel shook his head slightly. They had paid too high a price to accept half measures. Not good enough, Hayes said. The Zarathi Empire will release all human captives. You will recognize human sovereignty, and you will cease all slave trading operations within your territory. Korval's eyes widened. You ask us to change the foundation of our economy. That is impossible. Then the war continues, Daniel said flatly, and we'll make sure every enslaved species in your empire has the weapons and knowledge they need to fight back. How long do you think your empire will last then? The Zarathi diplomat looked at him with something like respect mixed with hatred. These humans had done what no other species had managed. They had broken the empire's power not through superior strength, but through sheer stubborn refusal to quit. The negotiations lasted 3 days. In the end, the Zarathi agreed to most of the human demands. They had no choice. Their fleet was crippled, their empire was in revolt, and continuing the war would mean their complete destruction. 6 months after the war began, Daniel returned to New Helena with Amy. The colony had been rebuilt, stronger than before. New settlers were arriving daily, including refugees from other species who saw humanity as liberators. Daniel stood at the memorial that had been erected in the town square. Hundreds of names were carved into the stone. Marcus Webb, Ryan Foster, Kevin Brooks, Claire Stevens, Paul Martinez, Lisa Grant, Helen Morrison, and thousands more. The cost of the war had been terrible. Amy stood beside him holding his hand. She was stronger now, though the scars remained. Do you think it was worth it? She asked quietly. Daniel thought about the question for a long time. I don't know if worth is the right word. I didn't start this to change the galaxy. I just wanted to save you. Everything else just happened. But you did change the galaxy, Amy said. The Zarathi Empire is falling apart. Species that were slaves for centuries are free now. That matters, Daniel nodded slowly. She was right. Though it didn't make the weight of all those deaths any lighter to carry. Across the galaxy, the Zarathi Empire was indeed collapsing. The rebellions had spread too far to contain. Former slave species were building new civilizations. The balance of power was shifting in ways that would reshape galactic politics for generations. And it had all started because one man refused to accept that his sister was lost. Because a handful of humans had shown that even the mightiest empire could be made to bleed. Years later, historians from dozens of species would study the human-Zarathi war. They would analyze the tactics, the strategy, the political implications, but they would all agree on one conclusion. The Zarathi made one fatal mistake. They took one human and assumed there would be no consequences. They didn't understand that humans don't calculate costs when it comes to their own. They don't weigh odds or consider strategy. They just fight. And the galaxy paid in blood for that lesson, but in the end it was a lesson worth learning. The age of empires built on conquest and slavery was ending. A new era was beginning, one where species stood together rather than knelt separately. Daniel Cooper never considered himself a hero. He was just a man who loved his sister enough to fight the whole galaxy for her. But sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. The stars shone bright over New Helena that night, and for the first time in months, Daniel slept without nightmares. The war was over. Amy was safe, and the universe would never forget what happened when someone